chapter 9. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. The sun was high, but the Tanga's top provided a partial shelter, and the summer heat had passed. Beyond the bazaar, the road curved to the right, and Abhay saw the nearby white domes of the massive sandstone mosque marking Krishna Janmasthana, the birthplace of Lord Krishna. Centuries ago, invading Muslims had destroyed the large Krishna temple and created the mosque in its stead. And now, directly in front of the mosque stood a newer, smaller Krishna temple. They approached the three-way junction, New Delhi, Central Mathura, Vrindavanam. The driver struck the horse with his whip, and the Tanga proceeded along the Vrindavana road, edging through the herd of white cows, the herdsman walking amongst them, carrying his stick. The road was busy with tongas and slow creaking ox carts loaded with market commodities and pulled by square black water buffalo. A string of small spindle-legged donkeys carried oversized loads of firewood and sandbags. Although much had changed in Abhay's life since he had come here to see his spiritual master during the parikrama years ago, Vrindavana had remained the same. He felt he had done the best thing in coming here, leaving the heat, the traffic, and fumes, the human passions of Delhi. It was a natural relief. Yet, even as he felt transcendental emotions for Vrindavana, impressions of his months of preaching in Delhi lingered in his mind. The city streets and himself, going from place to place with his back to Godheads. Life in Delhi had been constant, vigorous preaching. Now he was more than 60 years old, but he was not coming to Vrindavana to retire. He had retired from the household responsibilities, but not from his responsibilities of making back to Godhead as popular and sophisticated as illustrated weekly. He would live in Vrindavana and commute to Delhi, but he would never stop preaching. The sight of taller trees signaled the presence of Vrindavana as the thin horse trotted along past the police station and water trough for animals. On either side appeared the garden courtyards of private estates and ashramas, fragile white malati flowers, golden marigolds, frangipani trees, red hibiscus, trees of arrow, and many other flowers and trees, some known only in Vrindavan, bloomed forth in the brilliant sunlight. The Radha Govinda temple loomed fortress like on his left, and opposite in the distance the high rising tower of the Ranganatha temple. They entered narrow streets, tighter and busier places with the markets and city dwellings, and then it became quieter again. At the end of narrow street by the Yamuna river near Keshi Bathing Ghata stood the small and beautifully ornate entrance of the Vamsi Gopalaji temple. A narrow three-storied building with uh, three domes and many decorated arches. After stepping over the curbside drain and walking up three marble steps, Abhay entered the front door, the driver following him carrying the luggage. Once inside, Abhay removed his shoes and entered the courtyard, which was open to the sky through a metal grate, on which a few birds sat 2 floors above. A column of sunlight lit one side of the courtyard, where a potted tulsi sat atop a pillar. The temple seemed cool and quiet. Adjacent to the courtyard was the deity room, its door locked shut. Overhead was a mezzanine with rooms whose entrances were visible from the courtyard. A few saris and strips of cloth hung on improvised clothliness. Mahant Gopal, the temple pujari, whom Abhay had known since 1954, greeted him cheerfully. He was about the same age as Abhay and had long grey hair and an unruly beard. Although Abhay's attire was modest, he appeared well dressed compared with the Gopal, who wore only a coarse dhoti. Gopal led Abhay upstairs, coming out onto the roof, Abhay smiled to see again the wonderful vista. Barely 100 yards away, he could see the Yamuna, not only the immediate patch of water flowing before him, but to his left and right, a broad curving sheet of river shimmering in the afternoon sun. There were sand deltas, herds of cows and buffalo grazing, the flat, grassy banks of Yamuna, and plains and trees as far as the eye could see. And in the opposite direction was the town of Vrindavana, marked by dozens of temples, spires, and domes. Abhai's room, the only one on the roof, was small with a narrow double doors and barred windows. Sitting on the apartment's roof, monkeys with their tiny offspring sat watching unalarmed. Just outside the door, 2 feet high cement pyramid signified that the temple deity was directly beneath. Abhay entered the room, although through the barrier windows he could see the palace at Keshi Gata, the venerable tower of the Gopinath temple, and beyond the uninterrupted flat river, the green banks, and the sky. After acquainting Abhay with the detail of the room, a small kerosene burner, the rope, and the bucket for drawing bath water from the well to the roof, Gopal meticulously produced a government stamp rental agreement. Abhay wrote a short paragraph declaring himself a disciple of the late Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabupada and attesting to his renting the room at 5 rupees per month. Both parties signed. After his bath, Abhay took prasadam and rested. When he heard the bells ringing in the temple below, he went down to see the deities. Gopal, who had been the temple pujari for many years, had seen its reconstruction in 1923, had told Abhay that the temple deity Om Shri Gopalji had been installed 350 years before by Mahant Prahlada Dasa of the Nimbarka Vaishnava Sampradaya. Gopal himself had installed the deity of Radharani, Om Shri Gopalji, standing in the graceful threefold bending form, holding his flute, was very appealing. He was 3 feet tall and black marble. Radharani, a slightly shorter, was of a brass. They were simply dressed in rough white cotton, illuminated by the dim glow of kerosene lamp. Abhay could see that they were being cared for, but because of poverty, there was no opulence. He returned to the roof as the sun was setting over the town of Vrindavana, having the entire roof's walkway to himself. Abhay walked and chanted japa, enjoying the cooling early evening breeze from the Yamuna. Occasionally, a solitary boat would pass on the calm waters of the Yamuna, and a devotee somewhere unseen could be heard chanting evening prayers at Kesigata. He felt pleased with this location and in the heart of pastimes of Lord Krishna. He was not a newcomer spending his first day in the strange town. Everything here was already familiar and dear. As Vrindavana was Krishna's support, Abhay was Krishna's servant, the servant of the six Goswamis, the servant of his spiritual master. He felt at home. A day turned to twilight. Temple bells rang throughout the town. Abhay walked to the western side of the roof and looked into the city of thousands of temples. The Govindaji temple, the Ranganatha temple, and thousands of smaller temples were having their Samdhya Arati and Kirtana glorifying Lord Krishna. Abhay responded to the sights and sounds of Vrindavana as only a pure devotee could. His thoughts and emotions were full of appreciation, awareness of Krishna, Krishna's devotees, Krishna's lamp. Naturally, he began to think of preaching, hankering for others to know the intimate peace and ecstasy of Vrindavana. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was inviting all souls to join him in his eternal abode. Yet, even in India, few understood, and outside India, people knew nothing of Vrindavana or of Yamuna or of what it means to be free of material desire. Why shouldn't people all around the world have this? This was the abode of peace, yet no one knew anything of it, nor people were interested. But this is what they were actually hankering for. I think we can stop here. I think it's beautifully explained here how beauty of Vrindavana, where Prabhupada came to Vrindavana, you know, at the age of 60 plus, and from the streets of from Delhi, and now we can see how Vrindavana is a place of Krishna's abode, and yes, it beautifully explained this about us, auspicious and holy place in Vrindavana, how it compared to Delhi is a busy life, and Prabhupada was preaching in Delhi in the Delhi streets and all, but he did not stop preaching. He's visiting Delhi as needed, and he was staying. He found a place to rent, and he's talking about Vamshi Gopalji temple. Near Vamshi Gopalji temple, he was residing, and I think with that we can stop.